joining us for the third episode of this podcast. In this episode, we discuss the way that foster families have been perceived as a direct replacement of institutions and the voicelessness many foster parents experience, which is an issue for foster parent retention. In this episode, we call for a reframing of the role of foster parents so that the focus is put on the positive contributions they make to children's lives and wider society. So let's hear the discussion.
And gradually, because of the deinstitutionalization process, maybe, child protection started viewing the foster families as a service they need for shoving the children in instead of putting them in institutional care because the institutions were closed. They looked at the foster parents in the same way as they used to look at institutions. Any institution had to deal with any child, anytime, any part of the day or the night. And they wanted a foster care system which suited this need that they had. They still had no skills how to support families, how to work with the service providers. They just wanted a quick and easy and responsibility-free solution. So foster care is seen as a service, and it is not surprising that sometimes foster care children are called in the community bank machines. And the way foster parents are viewed in society is not really helpful. A lot of people left exclusively because of this attitude. There are foster parents who have moved from one place to another because of the way they were treated and the way their children were treated, children with disabilities, children with autism, with behavioral problems, and so on. Many just quitted altogether after they moved, the last child that they had moved on. And actually, if we want foster care, we need to see this as a family that offers a very important care for children without parental care. We should see the foster families as families with their family life and the children fitting in and the families adapting to each child as it comes and then saying goodbye and adapting to the new child as it comes. This is not a mini institution, no matter how much child protection would like it to be this way. And I think foster families in Bulgaria need the respect. They need the acknowledgement. They need to have their public voice. And this is something that we have a long way to go. And part of the problem, in my opinion, is the way the system was centralized and unified, and the rich experience and the rich opportunities of having different models in different communities, rural, urban, and so on, was lost.
And also to just summarize this regarding foster parents as just social service provider, in a way dehumanizes them. So it is very important because most of all they are people and they need to be treated as human beings with human experiences, because what they provide to the children is human connection. And when we regard them as just some sort of social services, essentially getting back to the institutional model of taking care of vulnerable children, which we don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, to quote from the study on the experiences of foster parents, one participant said, it would be good if the attitude was a little more human. Just very simply put, this really is, we haven't got any foster parents here today, unfortunately, although we would love to have foster parents. And maybe in the future, we'll be able to engage some foster parents in this kind of discussion. But really, to come from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that genuinely is the feeling that foster parents don't feel that they're treated like human beings, and that their social workers are more interested in completing the administrative tasks associated with supervising foster parents than investing in the relationships with the foster parents and supporting them emotionally. And, that's not to say we understand social workers have huge caseloads in Bulgaria. their workload is very, very big. And so it's not just a simple thing to say, oh, stop focusing on the administration side and focus on the relationships. But what really would be a good step forward from the foster parents' perspectives would be to have more of that that supervision relationship, which is much more sort of socio-pedagogical rather than focused on this administrative side. I think what is also really important here is this issue about foster parent voice and the voicelessness that foster parents experience. And I wonder if we could just discuss for a few minutes, what do we see are the barriers to this in foster parents advocating for themselves, speaking out about their experiences. I know I can talk about in the research I've conducted, trying to recruit foster parents to take part in confidential, anonymous interviews for a research study with ethical approval was very, very difficult. Convincing foster parents or inviting them and them being willing to share their experiences was quite challenging. And for a variety of different reasons, I think. So I wonder if anybody has something to say about what these barriers are.
Maybe if we look from a more global perspective, Bulgaria, we still have a particularist society where personal relations and emotions matter more than professional roles and performing professionally any task. And especially in small communities where people know each other, there is a lot of interpersonal tension. Bulgarians struggle to perform professional roles and put aside their personal preferences, their connections, and their emotions. If foster parents, for example, behave in a way that is not approved by child protection people or the foster care teams, they would automatically be punished by not placing a child with them, making them unemployed for many, many months. Or alternatively, if they raise their voice and try to be assertive and to contest the opinions of the other two players in the system, they may be offered for deletion from the register. We have personally supported foster parents who have been deleted on very spurious grounds, and they undertook legal challenge. With the child protection system, we have been present as witnesses. Luckily, the foster parents won. They were reinstalled as foster parents, but they can always be punished, but just not having any children for many months and even years. And this is something characteristic for the Bulgarian society. They're scared that if they don't obey and don't do what they're told to do by people who think they know better because they're experts and the foster parents are just ordinary people, they would not be able to continue to be foster parents and to have children in their care.
Yes, I think this is one of the problems, that there is a more relation based of the power. I don't know how to express in English, but power from the social care service and the foster families. And we talk already that how important is all this support to the foster families. But in a system like this, where power is more important, support is very weak or is very limited or not exist at all. And I think that's why I think that it is here, I think foster parents can do a lot, because actually the system has to change. Of course, I think this is very good initiative to unite somehow, to have we have Bulgarian Association of Foster Care National Association of Bulgarian Foster Families. I don't know how it's English exactly have to say this. And they had very good initiatives. They bring people together, foster families. They made something like awards of some of the families. I think these initiatives are very important, maybe not in every time in such a big scale, like national things, maybe in some places. But again, this is depends a lot from the system itself, the system who work with these foster families, who make assessment and after they evaluate their work. And this power relationships, it's challenging and risky to provide the support, because in this case we are talking more for provide instructions and expect somebody to follow this instruction, then which is completely different to be supportive and to provide support. And again, I think that it is all the reform started from institution and one institutional culture who had very big roots, deep roots, not only in Bulgaria, in the world. This is very strong way of thinking and practices institutional culture, and it's difficult to be changed. Somehow, always. The institutional culture find ways to replicate itself in any new form of services like foster care, small group homes, small scale residential services, and other services like daycare. Of course, there are very good examples. I'm not saying that every service is somehow very similar to the institutional system, but it's very, very difficult this to be changed seriously, because it's really long history and it's a very stable way of dealing with vulnerable people, children or adults, because they are very vulnerable and depends from the system, and sometimes the system is not finding the right way to support them, and most of the time finding the way how to treat them and to make them dependent, not to make them independent.
Listening to Galina and Biser now, I would say that what we need is a revolution in a way. So to speak, the communication style employed by the child protection system in Bulgaria is very authoritative. So we need, in a way, to empower the people that are placed lower in the decision-making pyramid to fight for their rights to be heard. And in this sense, this would be a revolution if we can help it happen.
I may just add that actually, unfortunately, because of this institutional culture, because of this tendency to use the power you have and sometimes abuse the power, the child protection system treats the foster families as if their family is at risk. They use exactly the same approach that they use to working with the families at risk, with the biological families. Lack of trust, suspicion, checking up, unexpected visits. They are aligned, the families at risk and the foster families, and this initial and intrinsic suspicion that they are not going to perform well, that they're doing it just for the money, that they're going to abuse the money that the state gives them for the child, they're going to use it and spend it on their own needs. This initial distrust is actually at the bottom of all the tensions and all the power play that happens during the process, and puts many normal self-respecting people off becoming foster parents.
So what we're discussing here really is the way in which this is a very complex issue, which is at multiple levels, facing barriers, facing difficulties. It's not just as simple as supporting foster parents in the way that we want to. There's many steps that need to be made to really. What I want to touch on now is Gali and Bissa, you've very briefly mentioned comparing the Bulgarian case to what's happening in other countries. And I think for listeners to this podcast who may be very familiar with the Bulgarian context, but not so familiar with what's happening elsewhere and similarities and differences in places which have got shared histories or not shared histories, this might be interesting. I believe that some of these issues are not only relevant to the Bulgarian context, but there are commonalities across neighbouring countries and also countries further away. So I don't know if from either of your experience, or Evgenia also, if you've got anything you think that'll be interesting to listeners to know, that perhaps Bulgaria, we're not alone in this, and other places are facing challenges too.
I can speak from experience with Moldova, Ukraine, and Belarus. All of them are descendants of the Soviet Union. And yes, we were very similar in the old days and in the way the institutional system was set up in our countries. And I would say they struggle with the same issues of the different systems not working together to support the foster parents, education, health, social protection not being very coherent in supporting foster parents. But the difference that I saw, it's my personal perception, I may be wrong, but the public image of foster parents in these countries is much better, is much higher. I don't know whether this is linked to the fact that another way of group foster care was started in the Soviet Union in 87, 88, where 5 children as a group were placed in an ordinary family in their own home. And sometimes the state provided bigger houses, or they extended the houses of this family, and they looked after their own children, no matter how many they were. And they looked after 5 and more, up to 10 other children. So it was a type of group foster care that was initiated. Maybe because of that legacy, the image of foster parents is much better, and people are respected for what they do, and they are supported. For example, if they can do other jobs alongside, they are allowed, because they only receive an allowance for looking after the foster children. And here in Bulgaria, for many years, when people were doing foster care under a labor contract, even if they had the opportunity when children were at school or in kindergarten or whatever, they were not allowed to do another job. And that is the difference that I can share, the public perception and the public support. Otherwise, the institutional support is the same as here, and the struggles are the same as here. But the public support is different, and the work, the labor of these people is respected. And yes, if they can combine work with foster care, with care for their children, they receive more understanding and more support in juggling their different duties.
I also think that there are some things which are really, how say, universal. Everywhere there is a problem. Some things which are difficult with foster care. But I think really, as Gala, that one of the big difference, in my opinion, also is that perception and mindset of the community, of the neighbors regarding the foster families. And when this is positive, it is it's a good base to develop good foster care. Because if the neighbors look as you as a foster family suspicious, why you take the child? Is it about money? it's like salary, or is it ethical to take child just because of the salary or things like this? All these rumors or suspicious or discussions, it's inevitably limited the wish of people to become foster families. That's why I again think that the image of the foster families has to be really well presented by the system itself. System who is a system for childcare who support the cases and the foster families.
But also, Biser, the way cases are reported, you never hear about anything good that has happened in a foster family, but you always hear in the public domain, social media, you always hear about the children that were exploited, that were mistreated, and that didn't receive good enough care. So the media and the social media also contribute to this, and the inability of foster parents to have their voice and to speak about themselves, compounded with the negative reports on cases of foster children, really disgraces the profession and disgraces the people who would like to do that as their vocation.
I'm not exactly sure how we ended up with this negative image of foster care altogether, but now I'm thinking that probably it has to do with the overall negative perception of the field of child protection and social work in Bulgaria. I mean, in general, this field is associated with poverty, with misery, with marginalization, and all the people that are somehow related to this field, being professionals or clients of the system, are somehow in this.
Well, I also think that one of the challenge here is that we always look for something like service, like magic wand, which will solve the problem. And I think that the foster care was seen as a service like this. When we establish foster care and we have a lot of families, foster families, there will not be so many problems. Children will be happy to be in the families. And I think that this is, it's a matter not of one universal good service, but packages of services who support foster families, parents, children, adults with disability. And this really bad image when media always try to see to present a case when something is wrong, and they don't see the other positive cases, or very rarely you may see some kind of feedback from the media that good foster family children are well accepted and well developed. I think this is part of this, that the expectation is that when we have a foster family system, the difficult cases, the problems, the risk will be less. It's not really the case, because some of the cases are challenging cases, and it is really difficult to not to have any problems and difficulties. But this is part of, that's why they have the biggest need to be in family and safe environment. We really talk very negatively, but if we are honest, if we look back 20-30 years ago, there is a big improvement in this field, because I know that there was a time that we have about 200-300 children in foster families, and now it's a huge increase. Of course, not what we all expected, especially when we are talking for this quality and support and the way of equal treatment, because I often hear for cases when the very, very important information for the child is hidden somehow. Maybe not always purposefully, but for example, for some disability, some challenging behavior, and foster families don't know this when they are not faced with such kind of behavior, which is again part of the, not of the idea and philosophy and the direction, but implementation of this. And all this idea that we are talking for support services, for a way of working when people provide support to children, families, staff who is working in these services. And this is something which in my opinion, still has a lot of work we have to do here to improve the quality of the services, the attitude of the professionals to families, biological families or foster families.
Sorry, Sarah, but I just want to support Biser, because I think there was this illusion that if children were moved out from institutions to foster care, or new children were placed directly in foster care, just the virtue of the family and the family life would be sufficient that both foster parents, their families, and the foster children will live happily ever after. There'll be no trouble, and child protection will have no work. Their workload will be decreased, which is not the case because it is shared care. And very often, because I do supervisions of child protection people, of foster parents themselves, foster care teams, they blame each other for the inability to cope with the case, to cope with the needs of the child, if we have to be right, with the complex needs of the child. And child protection says the foster parents are not good enough, they're not doing the right things, they're not coping. The foster parents are saying, well, do you want to take the child to your house and look after it 24 hours and feel what it's like? Foster care teams are trying to mediate between the child protection people and the foster families. And I think some of the negative now image is due to this illusion. Maybe we all had this illusion, maybe I had this illusion, that family life itself is enough for children to be happy, which is not the case, because they need a lot of professional support by everyone, the service providers, foster care teams, the foster parents, the extended family of the foster parents, and the child protection people, and the role of the biological families. And when all these people around the child are not coping, they tend to blame each other. And this is where the suspicion, the blame culture, and the negative image of foster parents, I think, came from.
I think this is an interesting point, and something that was actually raised by one of the participants in this study was the fact that they recognized, by very virtue of being a child who's in foster care, who's been separated from their biological family, there are challenges that arise for that child. And this particular participant just explained the way that he'd learned to recognize over his years as a foster parent that you can't just parent your foster children the way that you have parented your biological children. There's something extra which is needed, this kind of in my study what we called it everyday expertise of everyday life, this extra kind of competency that's needed from foster parents in order to be able to give children the care that they need. And that's, as Evgenia has raised before, that's the case not only for children with disabilities, or we're talking about children with complex needs, it's the case for generally children who've been separated from their biological families. This extra level of care which is needed.
Now, I again would like to say that, well, there is a problem in the system. We know problems, but at the same time, even with this problem, there are some children who are living in foster families, and they have better life. especially some children with disabilities who were in institutions. And this I think would like this to be the message that even the when the system is not perfect and it has to be improved, even with lack of support for foster families and sometimes really difficult discussion with the system and child protection departments, it's worth for the children because they really have better life, at least from the cases which I know. And again, these are really difficult cases, very complicated, and institutions. The prognosis for these cases were that they will not live longer. That they are very severe cases and not enough chances to live at all. And I think this is also somehow has to be recognized, that this family type of taking care for a child, of communication, is very important. And even the not good supporting system is not so strong to destroy this, because family is really it provides something which there is no other place, other thing, I don't know, other thing which this communication, this way of living could be provided. I'm saying this because very often when we discuss difficulties, the conclusion could be then why we have this. So let's think for another. This was wrong, or maybe this was mistake. But this is not. We just want to improve better, to make better system and to improve the provision of the services.
And also we need to acknowledge that most of the cases are objectively challenging. I mean, they are very difficult. If only for the fact that most of the children that are living in foster care live in some way in between their biological family and the alternative care placement, that is foster parents. So this situation is really very difficult for them, and also for the foster parents. So by acknowledging that the cases are difficult, we need to also acknowledge that it's only natural for people to struggle. It's not really something so extraordinary.
Yeah, these are, I think, really good points. And it is really important to recognise the huge value that foster care has in the continuum of alternative care, and the value that foster parents themselves bring to society, to the children that they care for, and to the deinstitutionalisation process. I also think it's important to remind ourselves when we're discussing these difficult issues that in foster families, children do receive a very special type of care, which is not always acknowledged or seen. There is work to be done definitely in changing the public perception around the need for foster care, around the value of foster parents, and also around the expectations, like Evgenia has just said, of what foster care should look like. And as Galis also mentioned, that it's not perfect, because there are many imperfections which are occurring within any foster care system in any country. But what the goal is really to be improving these children's lives. And we know there's a lot of evidence from around the world that when children are in families, their life experiences are much improved from when they're in residential care. watching or listening to this third episode of the ReFaB Conversations Podcast. In the fourth and final episode of this podcast season, we will look at ways to increase accessibility of foster care for children with disabilities and the pressing issue of what happens to children with high support needs when they leave foster care aged 18. Join us again next time to listen to this important discussion.